All right, we're about halfway through all. Thank you for all the vigorous conversation in the chats. I want to encourage everybody to attend the expo booths. There's lots of really good information from all of our partners in that area. I also want to let you know that we're getting started with our keynote address. I'm really happy to, I think we're very fortunate to be joined by Hamilton County Commissioner Alicia Reese. She has been both a city council person, a state representative, and is now a current vice president of the Hamilton County Commission. And in every one of those roles, she has been very focused on supporting Black families in this region. And I know she's had deep relationship with HUD over the years, and she's going to be here. She's going to be here as soon as she gets connected to introduce our keynote speaker, James Cunningham, today. I want to give everybody credit. We are all still learning new skills, almost 2 years into this virtual life we're all living. And I want to thank everybody who's both been patient and been quickly trying to fix all the problems that we're experiencing. Emma Shirey, Laura Castillo in particular have been behind the scenes trying to fix all the foibles. So thanks to that. And I'm going to just do hand puppets here in a minute as we're waiting for Commissioner Reese to get on the platform. Let's see. I'm going to maybe do a little bit of an introduction of James Cunningham, because I want you to know that while he is the administrator in our Midwest regional office, Jim knows Cincinnati well. He's been here, he knows this region, and he has a heart for what's going on here. And we're going to be really fortunate to hear what he's going to be talking about very shortly. And I understand that we're ready now. So I'm going to, with that, let Commissioner Reese take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry about that. We had a small power outage, but where there's a will, there's a way. So I want to thank my chief of staff for letting me use his office. Let me just say I'm excited and thankful to be a part of this conference today. Race, wealth, homeownership, understanding that in the African-American community, obviously, wealth was built and is built through homeownership. And so this conference is so important because there is a connection between race, wealth, and homeownership, and all of the obstacles that African Americans have to overcome and other minorities that have to overcome in order to obtain home ownership and also be able to keep home ownership. I want to thank Liz Bloom and everyone involved with this conference today for having the conference, to bringing the information back to us, and then affecting policy changes that are critical as we move forward in these very tough economic times. Many people are faced with fighting COVID. At the same time, they're fighting the economic challenges that COVID has put upon us, as well as being able to fight against some of the things that are happening. We want growth, we want progress, but we want to make sure that everyone participates in that progress and in that growth. And so Liz Bloom and her team and so many others that are part of this are working with us at the county, at Hamilton County, for the first time in history. We are putting $40 million toward affordable home ownership. And we're taking the ARA money and putting it toward that. We're going to be bringing groups, many of you who are on here today, together on how does that strategy look? How do we create product that is affordable and make sure that people can live and be able to build wealth right here in Hamilton County? So I'm very excited about this conference and what's going to come from this conference. I also want to announce that $5 million as of next week, we will be releasing $5 million program to help people right now through those who might have been affected with COVID in terms of being able to help pay their mortgage, being able to help pay their utilities. And I'm very excited to help lead in that effort. And we will be announcing that next week, and that money will be on the street. I want to, as I introduce our keynote today, I'm very excited to have the partnership with HUD, and want to say that it's very personal to me because our new Secretary of HUD, it has been a mentor to me throughout my career, as at the local level, as a vice mayor, at the state level, as a state representative, as a former president. She was president of the Black Caucus nationally. I was of the Ohio Black Caucus, and she really helped guide me and lead me. And even before she became secretary, helped me in getting into this position today. So I'm very excited to continue to work with her leadership and her team to make the vision that she has always been committed to, which is making sure that people have something to eat, make sure people have a roof over their head, and be able to also continuously build wealth for their families of the future. So we're very excited to partner with HUD and the new initiatives that you have, and want to also report to you that we have what you call a 513 relief bus. It's a caravan of relief. I think we're probably the only one in the country that has all of them together. We have a Hamilton County Equity and Resource Bus. It brings the vaccine to communities, those neighborhoods that are harder to serve, may not have gotten the vaccine. We bring that to them. We got the boosters out. We also bring additionally the economic resources through our Jobs and Family Services, the rental assistance, the home mortgage assistance, the small business assistance. So we're bringing all of that in conjunction with our Free Store Food Bank mobile unit. So we're bringing food, we're bringing economic assistance, and we're bringing health vaccine. And I think it's certainly a model for the rest of the country. So with that, I'm excited. You want to get to hear from the experts. We have an outstanding person that is going to be our keynote speaker today. We're doing something very creative today. He will be joined by illustrator Brandon Black of Drawn Versation. I like that. So I want to introduce James A. Cunningham of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. While Jim moved to Chicago years ago, he knows Cincinnati very well, and we thank him for being a part of this event today. HUD has played an important role in supporting our communities, as well as work to move to a more equitable, prosperous place, especially for Black families. And we've got a lot of work to do there. As Deputy Regional Administrator for HUD's Midwest Regional Office, Jim is responsible for coordinating the delivery of HUD programs to Region 5 in 6 states: Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio, and Wisconsin. He oversees the operations of 7 HUD field offices throughout the region, managing White House initiatives, secretarial priorities, and achievement of HUD agency priorities and goals. Jim has been with the department for over 30 years in various capacities in both headquarters and field, and has served as the Chicago Regional Office Deputy Regional Administrator for 7 years. Jim started his HUD career as a presidential management intern in HUD headquarters in the Community Development Block Grant Program. He has also worked in 3 field offices and was the field office director for the Cincinnati HUD office for 14 years. Prior to coming to HUD, Jim worked at the Chrysler Motor Corporation as a management trainee in his hometown in Illinois. He earned a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Illinois in 1987. Please help me in welcoming our keynote today. Of course, he got his master's in public administration, and we don't want to forget that, from American University. So please welcome our keynote speaker today, Mr. Jim Cunningham, as well as Brandon, who is a visual practitioner and founder of the Drawn Versation, a visual facilitation practice featuring real-time scribing, experience engineering, and graphic design services. Drawnation helps people with a purpose see their way to it. So please welcome both of them to the stage. And also, Jim, please tell our secretary that I said hello, and we'd love at some point for both of you to come down and see what we're doing with the dollars that you guys provide us. And I can't leave without saying, send all the money back here to Hamilton County. We'll take it all and get it to the people. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Reese. It's good to see you again, and it's good to be virtually in Cincinnati. I was excited to be able to come back, and we're hoping, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we're hopeful we'll be sending lots of money your way. But thank you again, Commissioner Reese, for the kind introduction. And on behalf of our secretary, Marcia Fudge, and the Biden-Harris administration, it's my pleasure to be here today to talk to you about what is going on at HUD. It's really an honor to participate. As Commissioner mentioned, I spent 15 years, 14 of those years in Cincinnati. So half of my career was at HUD in Cincinnati. So I appreciate all the partnerships that we developed, all the great work that we did to promote decent, safe, and affordable housing in Cincinnati, as well as promoting fair housing. And we did some great work, and we're going to continue to do that great work. You're in capable hands with our field office director up in Columbus and the great Columbus staff. Tom Leach is our field office director, and the staff in our Columbus office services Cincinnati well. So, but we are happy to serve. I wanted to talk about, I kind of put today's keynote into 3 different kinds of buckets, so to speak. One, I just want to touch on our HUD's COVID response and what we've done to address the pandemic. Then I want to talk about housing as infrastructure, the Build Back Better agenda, and what that means potentially for bringing resources to build more affordable housing, both rental and homeownership. And then I'm going to talk about the administration's efforts on diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I want to focus on not only the fair housing side of it, but what that means for homeownership, particularly homeownership for people of color. So those are the 3 things that I really want to cover today, and hopefully we'll have some time for some questions at the end. So obviously we've been in this pandemic since full board since March of 2020. So we're a year and a half in. We have had several responses. The initial response, I think, was the CARES Act programs, and we brought several resources through several HUD programs. Primarily, the resources that we delivered were Community Development Block Grant. There was 3 rounds of Community Development Block Grant funds, 2 rounds of the Emergency Solutions Grants to help our homeless populations. We did a round of housing opportunities for persons with AIDS to address that specific population. But we also helped our public housing partners through operating funds to help them adapt to needs and doing business in a different way. We also provided Housing Choice Voucher supplemental funding to help offset the loss of income that many experienced primarily at the beginning of the pandemic. We actually added additional Housing Choice vouchers for persons with disabilities. And we offered our multifamily owners and agents additional supplemental money to help them offset the costs of the pandemic. All told, we provided over $1 billion to state and local governments in Region 5. So we're really proud of that resources and working in lockstep with those partners and our housing authorities. But specifically, just to bring it down locally, we provided over $16.9 million to the city of Cincinnati, $7.2 million for Hamilton County, and the Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority received an additional $10.5 million, all to prepare, respond, or prevent COVID-19. So we're proud of those efforts. The other side, on the homeownership side, on our FHA side, we have FHA Forbearance, which allows those that are struggling to pay their FHA mortgages to basically put a pause. All they need to do is contact their servicer, and they can kind of just stop their mortgage payments. And it's really a simple process of calling your servicer. So if anyone's experiencing difficulties in paying their FHA mortgage, they can do that. We've also put a stop, even though the COVID-19 eviction order has ceased, we still have protections that if an FHA mortgage gets foreclosed, that we cannot evict anyone during that. So there's an eviction moratorium for that. The last thing that I want to talk about Commissioner Reese was talking about bringing vaccines to folks. HUD and HHS kind of embraced the Biden administration's all-of-government response to COVID. We worked together to do a vaccination partnership, and so we have worked to bring over 1,000 vaccination clinics to HUD-assisted households across the country. We did over 80 in the state of Ohio, thanks to the efforts of Tom and his team up there. But we're trying to bring it to underserved populations, and particularly HUD-assisted residents who have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. So we've done a great response. We're still trying to work on things to make sure we get the money out that's been allocated under CARES Act. And we'll talk a little bit later. I'm going to talk a little bit later about the ARP money. So we have been very busy. I know that you and our providers have been very busy trying to get all these resources out to help respond to the pandemic. So the next thing that I'm going to go into is our efforts to address homelessness. One thing we do know is that during our last annual homeless census population count, that homelessness was rising even before the pandemic, and the pandemic has only made it worse. So in response to that, Congress, under the American Rescue Plan, allocated to HUD $10 billion for 2 programs. I think that it's so significant. Our budget is roughly around $65 billion, and now we are allocating for just 2 programs $10 billion. So it's a significant investment. What are the 2 programs? Well, first is the Emergency Housing Voucher Program. HUD has allocated over 70,000 emergency housing vouchers to housing authorities across the country. And what the purpose of this is to house either those experiencing homelessness or those that are at risk of becoming homelessness. And it's a little bit unique because it created a unique partnership where housing authorities had to work with local continuum of care organizations. So with the COC's roles, the continuum of care is to make referrals to the housing authority of folks that can be successful in permanent housing that has with limited supportive services. So we're talking about people that are ready to move on. They've been in homeless programs and they're stable. The emergency housing voucher is perfect for them to be able to move on to permanent housing through the emergency housing voucher. So we are excited about that program. It launched early summer, and we're now in the process of providing incentives to housing authorities to help get them leased up, and working with our continuum of care organizations to make sure they're making referrals. They can also get referrals from providers of domestic violence or those fleeing human trafficking or sexual abuse. So there's a lot of ways to get referrals to the housing authorities, but we're very excited about that. The second program that I'm excited about is the Home ARP, Home American Rescue Plan program. Again, this is funding that went to $5 billion that went to home participating jurisdictions to basically provide and build permanent supportive housing. So we're looking at things of unique ways of getting this money on the street. We just issued the notice last month on how to apply for and get these funds, but they can be used to actually build or purchase, acquire, and fix up things like hotels that are suitable for permanent supportive housing environments. We'll be continuing to work with our home PJs to get this money on the street and help to address homelessness as we know it. As part of that, the White House also just began an initiative called House America. And what we're asking for local elected officials, governors, county commissioners to sign up to participate in House America. And House America is really kind of builds off the efforts of the emergency housing voucher and the home ARP money, by having communities set specific goals for housing people that are experiencing homelessness. That's the first goal. And the second is to produce units that can house people experiencing homelessness. So we're working to get communities to sign up and say, yeah, we're willing to take this challenge. We're willing to get people housed, and we're really to build more units to get more people housed. So we're working with our local elected officials to get them to sign on to that initiative. And the last piece, just kind of on preventing homelessness, is that while it's not a HUD program, it's a Treasury program. I think Commissioner Reese referred to it is the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, and there's also emergency home buyer assistance programs. Again, this is a Treasury program, but it's basically meant to have people that are having difficulty paying rent or their mortgage bring the arrearages up so that they stay in their homes and not get evicted. One of the things that we're doing at HUD to help support this initiative is we have a partnership with Treasury, and we are doing technical assistance to those communities that are struggling to get the money out. We are working with, I think there's 3 communities in Ohio, including the city of Cincinnati, that we are offering TA to. So we're trying to help get that money out because we know that we don't want homelessness to get any worse. We want to keep people in their homes, and the Emergency Rental Assistance Program is a $40 billion resource to help do just that. So now I want to go on to the President's Build Back Better agenda, and I think this falls in nicely with what kind of the theme of this conference. But I'm going to talk first about the rental production, then I'm going to talk about homeownership. But the Build Back Better agenda has a goal of producing 2 million units of affordable housing. So how are we going to do that? First, I'm going to talk. The Build Back Better agenda proposes adding money for public housing. Greg Johnson will be glad to hear this. The proposal calls for capital funds to address the backlog in capital needs that have long been unaddressed. That's one piece. The second piece is it adds significant money for the Choice Neighborhood Program for rehab, modernization, and redevelopment of public and assisted housing. You may be familiar with Choice Neighborhoods up in Avondale. That was a choice that community builders took on that project, the troubled multifamily portfolio in Avondale. So this gives, instead of being able to do we typically at HUD give out 4 grants a year, this would give us significant resources to do much more and address much more housing. It also calls for housing authorities to build back to their fair cloth limits. Now, you may not be familiar with fair cloth limits, but every housing authority has what is called a fair cloth limit, and that's the cap on the number of public housing units each housing authority can have under annual contribution contracts. It's a lot of lingo, but with the Rad program, the Rental Assistance Demonstration Programs, and I know Cincinnati has done some great work. I just saw the grand opening up in Price Hill of a Rad conversion. But the Rad program allows the housing authorities, to actually have debt on their housing, which our public housing program doesn't. So it allows them to recapitalize their portfolio. But when they do that, it takes it out of what we call the Section 9 program, or the public housing program, and puts it into the Section 8 program. What it does also, though, is it lowers the number of units under the fair cloth limit. So the housing authorities that have participated in the Rad program will have the ability to add new public housing units, and the Choice Neighborhood Program proposal under the Build Back Better agenda allows that to happen. We also have a program under the Rad program that allows, when you're doing a Rad deal, to actually add, we call it section Rad to fair cloth, so you can also add units that way. So that's a new tool in the toolbox, where we're hopeful to get money for the Choice Neighborhood Program. The other thing it adds money for is to address health and safety items, as well as environmental impacts. We know that a lot of the inventory suffers issues with mold. There's still lead. So there's actual money for public housing authorities to address those impacts. And the last piece of under the public housing program under Build Back Better is to increase the number of, and supply of housing choice vouchers. So that's another tool. We know that over half the people, I can't remember the number, I think it's 10 million families in this country pay more than 50% of their income for rent. A housing choice voucher, and 25% of those that are eligible to participate in that program cannot participate in the program because there's just not enough funding. So these additional vouchers will be very, very helpful in addressing the affordable housing shortage. The other thing that Build Back Better does is it has historic investments for our production programs. There's a big allocation for the Home Investment Partnership Program. There's a big investment for the National Housing Trust Fund, and there's an increase in the Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program. So those are those three big programs will allow communities to invest in affordable rental and homeownership product through those programs. So we're excited about that proposal. Another piece of Build Back Better is community resilience grants to address climate change and its effects on housing. There is additional money for CDBG disaster recovery grants to help mitigate the effects of climate change on the housing portfolio. There's also a provision for what we're calling the multifamily green retrofit program to address the needs of the assisted housing portfolio. One of the things that I know about the housing stock, and particularly our subsidized housing stock, is that it was invested in probably around the 1980s. Whenever I had to do a hot issues paper for headquarters, I said that the housing portfolio of assisted housing in Cincinnati, it's old and needs recapitalization. This green retrofit program will certainly be able to do that, help groups that have been reinvesting in their housing. I know we worked well with the Model Group, the community builders, Over the Mary and Over the Rhine Community Housing in preserving that stock, but we still need more tools in the toolbox to be able to address that portfolio to keep that project-based assistance housing families. The other thing that I'm excited about in Build Back Better is there's actually money for new project-based rental assistance. We have not, I've been at HUD for 30 years, and during that time, I've not seen a new project-based Section 8 contract. We do have some contracts, they're not project-based Section 8 under the 202 and 811 program, which is supportive housing for the elderly and for the disabled, but we haven't done a new contract. So this actually calls for money to do new Section 8 contracts. Any of the developers and operators of affordable housing know that actually penciling the money and doing the construction it's not easy, but it's doable. The hard part is getting the operating funds. And so this new project-based rental assistance is really a huge program that can help offset those operating costs and keep more people housed. And the last thing is, I mentioned the 202 program. Build Back Better also calls for new money for not only new money, but more investments for senior housing under the 202 program. You know, I've seen the secretary in many of her remarks. She was just in Chicago recently, and the deputy secretary has talked about this. This is a historic moment in time. If we don't do this now, we're going to be in trouble. So I know that Congress is working on, there's several versions of Build Back Better. There's a reconciliation bill. There's also the Build Back Better agenda bill. Congress is obviously working on that. But with these historic investments, we have the opportunity to add to the supply of affordable housing like we haven't done in my 30-year career at HUD. So I think I urge you to keep your eye on those programs and see how they progress. And also get ready, because if it does, Commissioner asked for more money. If we get to where we're going, the communities, the city of Cincinnati, Hamilton County, the nonprofit developers, you're going to be very busy. And I just want to say, first, thank you for all that you do to date with all the handling of the CARES Act, but get ready. If we get this investment, it's going to be very significant. So I wanted to lastly talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how it affects homeownership and HUD's role in this process. So after taking office, President Biden issued 2 executive orders regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. One is promoting fairness, equity, and inclusion for all federal agencies, and the second directly addressed to HUD to examine the effects of previous policies on implementation of the Fair Housing Act, as well as the disparate impact rule. So as many of you know, that HUD's biggest role, we are the enforcer of the Fair Housing Act, and enforcing that is key to leveling the playing field on the homeownership side. So a couple things I just want to update you on is in reviewing the policies of implementing the Fair Housing Act, we all know that there is a part of the act that requires HUD and HUD recipients to affirmatively further fair housing, not just refrain from discriminatory housing practices. We had issued a rule back in 2015, I believe, that started a fair housing planning process. That all got put on hold in the last administration. So what we've done is, because of the executive order, we've relooked at that policy and we've reinstated the certification that grantees and public housing authorities have to do, that they are indeed affirmatively furthering fair housing. So when communities are developing their consolidated plan or housing authorities are doing their PHA plans, they must certify that they are indeed affirmatively furthering fair housing. The second piece of what we've done is also we're encouraging communities to voluntarily establish a fair housing planning process, and we're offering paid technical assistance to help them go through that process. We know that there's patterns of segregation that have been long held, and the federal government's even to blame for much of that. So we need to intentionally plan to affirmatively further fair housing and break down those barriers that have existed over time. So we're encouraging communities to do that. And we're also we're promulgating rules on what affirmatively furthering fair housing will mean for communities and what that process will look like. So for now, it's a voluntary planning process and a certification. And why is that important to homeownership? Because the homeownership gap between whites and households of color has remained steady for nearly 60 years. It has not closed. And that is just simply unacceptable. So what do we need to do to increase homeownership for minority people of color households in this country? I want to talk about 3 things. 1, leveling the playing field and our efforts in that. 2 is access to credit. And 3 is elusive down payment resources. And actually, then there's a 4th thing I'm going to talk about, a provision in the Build Back Better agenda that will actually increase the supply of affordable homeownership. So we will continue to enforce the Fair Housing Act. One of the things the Secretary has done under the Biden-Harris administration is started an Integrity Property Appraisal and Valuation Equity Task Force. Property Appraisal and Valuation Equity Task Force. So it is a first-of-its-kind interagency task force that is working to root out racial discrimination in the appraisal and home buying process. It's part of the administration's broader effort to advance racial equity and reinvestment in communities that have been systemically left out of the wealth-building opportunities. So the task force is co-chaired by our Secretary, Secretary Marcia Fudge, and the Domestic Policy Council Director, Susan Rice. It will continue to host a series of stakeholder listening sessions to identify near and long-term opportunities to advance equity in home appraisals. I think we saw a case, I think there was one in Loveland, Ohio, where we go in, get an appraisal, and we got one value, and the family took out everything and put up pictures of white family, and the property values increased. That is simply unacceptable. So the PAVE task force is going to look at policy, guidance, and regulations for strategies and actions that will help ensure that government oversight and industry practices further valuation equity, and identify legislative changes that would reduce bias in valuations. We're also going to look at the enforcement and compliance for potential policies for ensuring comprehensive and coordinated approach to combating valuation bias through enforcement, compliance, and other efforts, and advancing equity and increasing opportunities in the appraiser workforce. So we're going to look at strategies and actions to combat valuation bias through training and removing barriers to entry in the appraiser profession. The other tenet of the PAVE task force is to reconsideration of value process. They're going to build strategies and actions to develop a model for meaningful reconsideration of value process to include policy and guidance considerations. And finally, there's an automated valuation model, and they're going to seek an alternative property valuation methods. So they're going to look at strategies and actions to eliminate or reduce bias related to automated valuation models and alternate property valuation methods. All this is meant to level the playing field. It's been unfair that people of color are not able to build wealth and through homeownership, and even when they are homeowners, we're getting them lower values based solely on race. So we're going to work hard to make sure that we carry out the Fair Housing Act, but look at these policies to eliminate the barriers, particularly on the appraisal side. The next thing that I want to talk about is part of the Build Back Better agenda, and as it relates to homeownership. Part of the Build Back Better agenda called for a program to incentivize the removal of exclusionary zoning and harmful land use policies. So for decades, exclusionary zoning laws like minimum lot sizes, mandatory parking requirements, and prohibitions of multifamily housing have inflated housing and construction costs and locked families out of areas with more opportunities. So the plan seeks to help jurisdictions reduce barriers to producing affordable housing and expanding housing choice for people with low and moderate incomes. So there's actually a program in there to incentivize communities to plan and remove these regulatory barriers. So now I want to talk about accessing credit. There's some things that we have already done to help increase access to credit, particularly for people of color. One thing we've changed the way we treat student loan debt under an FHA mortgage to reduce the burden of people of color are disproportionately affected by having student loans, and it's blocking them out of the market. So we've reduced the barrier and how we calculate student loan income in the calculation of debt service. So it's a lot easier now to get an FHA loan if you have student loan debt. The other thing we're looking at doing is increasing the loan term from 30 to 40 years, thus lowering the debt service required to qualify for a mortgage through a longer amortization period, which will actually increase the debt service to allow more people to have access to FHA loans. Finally, I want to talk about down payments. So the Build Back Better agenda has resources for more down payment assistance. That's one thing. The other thing is that we need to provide more access to affordable homes through the sale of our HUD-owned homes. So one of the things that we've done when HUD and FHA a bank forecloses on an FHA loan, they sell it back to HUD, and HUD will put it back on the market. What we've seen is too many times the majority of those homes are going to investors. So we're trying to make those affordable homes more accessible to people that are going to be potential home buyers. So we're lengthening the time period that it goes on the market and is available to actually home buyers that will live in the property or for nonprofit organizations. The second thing we're doing is putting a cap on the number of homes that can be sold to investors. So we're trying to increase the supply for available homes through our HUD home sales. The last thing I want to talk about, and then we'll open it up for questions, is under the Build Back Better agenda, the administration has proposed a new tax credit program that would add more than 500,000 new and rehabilitated homes for low and moderate income home buyers and homeowners. The goal is to build and rehabilitate 500,000 homes across the country, millions of homes sit empty and in poor condition with values too low to support new construction or substantial renovation. To address this, The Build Back Better agenda proposes creating a new federal tax credit based on the innovative bipartisan Neighborhood Homes Investment Act. The tax credit will make homeownership and wealth building possible for low and moderate income families by encouraging the construction and rehabilitation of homes in and for underserved communities. So as you can see, the administration is focused on leveling the playing field, making sure that home buying process is fair and equitable for everyone, removing the barriers, particularly barriers for people of color to access home ownership, and trying to provide more tools for communities to increase home ownership and allow people of color, families of color, to build wealth in their communities. So you can see we got a lot going at HUD, and we're looking forward to continue our partnership with everyone. And I know we're going to be back later today to do a wrap up, but I just want to say that I know that the community, the affordable housing community in Cincinnati, will use these resources wisely and for the best and mighty purposes of serving the people of Ohio. So thank you for your time, and I guess hopefully we have time for some questions, and Liz will be able to facilitate that.
Yes, I hope so. So Jim, I just want to thank you. I mean, it's just to listen to you, it is clear what a huge role HUD plays in this arena and how important it is to effectively work with HUD. I mean, the resources are paramount. So it also occurs to me that you have spent most of your life on the side of the equation that you are on, which is making sure that people get funds from HUD. What would you, and you've said to us, we need to get ready. What would you advise local governments and CDCs and other players in the market to be doing differently or more or better than they are now? How could we be more effective? So maybe said another way, how could we be a more effective partner with HUD to make best use of these resources? And you know us, so you know Cincinnati. So I guess I want you to think about that from a national standpoint, but particularly maybe from a local standpoint. Jim, can you hear me? Emma, maybe oh, let me see. Oh, I think we're having some technical difficulties here. I'm not sure, Emma, if people can hear me or Jim. Jim is looking like he really wants to answer this question, but I think he can't hear me right now. Emma, how are we doing? All right. I want to thank Brandon. It's really interesting to watch what he's doing while Jim is talking and we're working. So thank you, Brandon. And I think we have lost Jim for a minute. Hopefully we're going to get that back. I'm also looking at some of the questions that you all are posting in the comments section. And I'm going to get there with Jim if we can get him back on. I see a lot of questions about making sure that housing is livable, which is in good condition. Jim, can you hear us now? Maybe not. All right. I've got a couple of other things we want to talk about for a minute. Hopefully we're going to get that back. I'm also looking at some of the questions that you all are posting. All right, guys, I think we're definitely having technical difficulties. We want to talk about vouchers. We want to talk about how we can get more vouchers. Jim, can you hear us now? Nope. So please, if you will, if you've got questions in particular for Jim at this point around HUD's role in this affordable housing and Black homeownership area, please put them in the comments section. And when we get Jim back, I'm going to share them with him. I think one of the things that I heard Jim say was we've got to be prepared to ramp it up. And we've said all morning long, this issue is real. We need to figure out how to accomplish that. Jim, can you hear us now? I think still not. I'm going to go see if Emma's got any advice for us. So I think we are just about at time. I really want to I've got some questions for Jim myself, and I would really love to hear from him. Maybe what we can do is steal some time from this session and put it in the last session, and we can pose some of this to Jim at that point. He will be joined at that point by Hamilton County Commissioner Denise Driehaus and our friend at Realtist, Derek Dansby, who's also at Charter. So Emma, maybe if I can suggest at this point that we go ahead and do our break and then give this time back to Jim when we get to our final session, if that makes sense. Oh, Jim is refreshing now. So Brandon, how does this look on your drawing? We have moments of waiting to get the technical issues correct. I don't know if Brandon can hear me now either. Maybe nobody can hear me. We're going to go to the gift cards and the drawing right now. So keep those questions for Jim and know that we will pose them to him at the final session. And Emma, I understand that we're going to go to the gift card drawing right now.
Welcome back. Wait for the wheel to come back on the screen. All right. So welcome back to our third drawing. We will be giving out we'll be giving out 5 gift cards. And we can go ahead and get started. Oh, sorry. We'll be giving out 10 gift cards. 5 live. So we have our first winner coming up. Congratulations. We move on to our next drawing. Congratulations. And as a reminder, please type your name - winner in the chat to claim your prize. Congratulations. We have 2 more. There we go. And our last live drawing.